Okay. Hi, Michael. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Good afternoon, Douglas. Thank you so much for having me and interviewing me today.
Oh,
It's
my
quite an
pleasure.
honor. Thank you.
My pleasure. Happy to have you here. When I was reading through your bio, I happened to think of an interview that I did about a year ago with a guy named Michael Malone, who was best friends and confidant of Charles Bukowski. And Charles Bukowski was good friends with Hunter Thompson.
Right. Yeah. Wasn't he a beat poet or what was he?
Yeah, I think that was his official title, was a beat poet. Yeah. And a kind of an
Yeah,
observer of the, but he was the West Coast version.
exactly.
The East Coast was, uh, now his name slips me.
Okay. It'll come up.
Yeah. There was just a film made about him too, and he was involved with, Jack Kerouac was part of that group.
Well, as you remember, there was another guy who was a principal in that group, and I think he appears in on page one in the On the Road book by Kerouac, and that is my so-called cousin namesake Dean Moriarty.
Oh, okay, I don't know that name. The other
Yeah, oh
one,
yeah, he's a big one in there. Yeah,
uh, why can't I think of that guy's name? I keep wanting to
I
say
don't know.
Abby Hoffman, but I know that's not it.
No, no, but at least we came up with another West Coast one because that Dean Moriarty, he's like I say, he's on page one of On the Road. He
Okay.
might be the driver of the van or something. He's he's very, very important guy. And I know that because of my name, and people always ask me, it's either that one or it's James Moriarty, Professor Moriarty, the arch nemesis of Sherlock Holmes, the Napoleon of crime.
Well, I'm going to figure this out, so we'll get back to it. Let's move
Sure.
on to. So, you are a trial lawyer, or were? Are you retired? Are you practicing anymore?
I'm still practicing pretty much every day. I mean, not Saturday and Sunday like I used to, but 5 days a week for sure. Yeah, still doing it. I
Okay.
enjoy it.
And prior to that, you were an investigative reporter in college, is that correct?
Basically, yeah. I mean, I started off as just a reporter, but I couldn't help myself. I kept looking for the story under the story. And so, yeah, I kind of morphed into what we would call an investigative reporter that caused me to really run up against the law repeatedly in terms of developing a story and asking questions of legal people. So I ended up going to law school. And the reason to go to law school was just to become an investigative reporter, like the guys that were around, if you remember or saw them back in the day during Watergate, all those NBC, CBS, they had the greatest reporters.
Oh, yeah.
And there was so much to investigate. And to which you're probably going to say, where are they now? We need them now. It's like,
I just saw something on Woodward and Bernstein. I think they're both still
wow.
alive, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those were kind of the people that, I admired and, tried to be like. And problem is when I graduated from law school, I had an in or a connection with ABC, and I thought could get it hired by ABC News and become a fledgling reporter, or if not, to go to work at a publication, Louisville Post Dispatch, not really the New York Times. I didn't have any connections there, but maybe Wall Street Journal, because I graduated from University of Nebraska, which was considered a very good journalism school, not as renowned as Northwestern Journalism School, but well respected, a lot of people in the field. And but the problem was when I graduated, it was a worldwide recession, and nobody was hiring anybody. so so it's I feel that so many of these kids today are so fortunate that they can just go out and get a job. Back then, it was hard getting a job anywhere, doing anything. And it was hard getting a job later on as a lawyer. It was like, whereas today they just can go out and get jobs and they don't have to be waiters and and bartenders and all these other things.
Well, there's a lot more opportunity thanks to the internet to do
I guess. Yeah,
entrepreneurial type work, which wasn't
yeah,
available prior to the internet. There's a ton of online work.
yeah,
And,
absolutely.
my generation and probably yours, it was very typical for somebody to get one job and work there for 20 or 30 years and then retire with the gold watch. And when you look at the kids now, the average resume has 10, 12, 15 different jobs. Now, that used to be a bad thing. Now it doesn't necessarily reflect that you can't commit. It's just the nature of the market these days.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
quite different, that's for sure.
you know. So let's pivot over to your book because we
Yes,
do
sir.
have only a 15-minute window here. You've actually got two on here. One is about Hemingway, and one is about Hunter Thompson, who we mentioned earlier. Why did you pick those two?
I don't know if I can simplify that. I can start with the Hemingway. And Hemingway, it turns out, is really two books. It's it's like a series, and the same thing with Hunter Thompson. But the series are together and they're cohesive. So you could look at it as two stories because they are tied together within themselves, if you will. So the Hemingway two books are Hemingway's Retreat to Ireland and Hemingway's Return to England. The Hunter Thompson is volume one, two, and three of called The Return of Hunter S. Thompson, An Untold Story of Nazi Hunting. Okay, on the Hemingway, why Hemingway? Well, I've just always been sort of mesmerized by the life that guy lived, but also as a reporter and as somebody, an English literature student in college and high school, really. I went to a very good high school. We did a lot of reading of great books. And, he just sort of stood out to me. I liked the style, the Spartan style, the lack of, adjectives and adverbs all over the place, which sort of like what you hear in a press release from the White House these days. It's just all adjectives. I like the fact that he would just and cut the uh, cut the flowery lingo out and get to the heart of the story. Hemingway started as a reporter. He was a gumshoe, as if investigative reporter, and there is a great similarity that very few people even think about between those two because Hunter Thompson was a journalist also, and he had his style of they call gonzo, so gonzo journalism. He told the story from the point of view of who it was happening to, of the person in the story. But if you look back at Hemingway's original writing, is even as early as when he was just 19. He graduated from high school there in Oak Park, had an uncle who was with the Kansas City Star, decided not to go to college, much to the disappointment of his parents, his father being a doctor, his mother a piano teacher. He just wanted to get out and get out into the world. And so he got hired on and became basically what we would call a gumshoe reporter at the Kansas City Star. And he would cover stories, including there's a famous one. If I'm rambling, you let me know. But one of the great stories that he worked on was, the editor said, go out and do a story on these prostitutes that we've got this problem with in downtown Kansas City or whatever the particular neighborhood was. And so Hemingway went out and he did the story from the viewpoint of the working girl and what life was like to her, as opposed to she's a scorn to society or she's a bad person or what the editor was looking for. Hemingway gets back with the story, types it up, prepares it, turns it in, and the editor says, "We're not going to publish this. This is no good. You've got to." And at that point, here's this young 19-year-old man who says, "I will never listen to an editor again. The story I'm telling is the right story, is the good story. What you're asking me for, that's not true, and that's not right." So, in a certain sense, even at age 19, Hemingway is really almost starting gonzo journalism. The point of view of the person in the story as opposed to, what's this scandal about, like some of these TV shows that we see these days. So that's one way. You may have some further questions about more, and I can certainly add more, but I don't want to ramble too much, Douglas.
So Hemingway basically wanted to show this from the perspective of the working girl rather than making a moralistic
There you go.
opinion about
Yep.
it. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Which I think we've lost a lot of that in our news broadcasts as of late, because it seems to me, depending on which side of the political coin you're on, you can get your fill of your echo chamber from either side, depending on which channel you go to. And I think that's unfortunate. I really miss Walter Cronkite.
Oh, me too. Me too. God, I love that guy. He was great.
Because he just reported the news as it was and allowed people to make their own opinion about it.
Every night. It was great.
Every night. Every night.
And as you know, and then he said, and that's the way it is.
And that's the way it is. And there's just, it's a different breed. There isn't, that breed doesn't
I don't know
exist anymore.
if you get a chance, but, and I don't know if I'll get a chance, but I would love to, at least we can talk about it. George Clooney now is doing Edward R. Murrow on Broadway. And what did he say? Good night and good luck.
Yeah.
And this is Edward R. Murrow from London, during the war. I mean, we weren't around then, but we heard it afterwards, and what a guy.
Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. The whole format of this show is based on Edward R. Murrow's Person to Person. We literally copied his set and just modernized it to the 21st century.
Wow.
Once you see it, you'll get it, because if you've ever seen the original show that he did sitting in the lounge chair chain smoking, I don't chain smoke. That's the only difference.
No, yes, I saw that. I studied that guy. I thought he was magnificent.
But I think,
and he would be like in the lineup with Hemingway and Hunter Thompson, even though those guys are pretty far from each other. Nevertheless, there is a lot of similarity. And the story about Hemingway, he fakes his death and goes on to live in Ireland in a castle that President Kennedy hooks him up with. And so that's his story. And then he later goes to England and meets the vets over there at Remembrance Day. And it sort of helps him try to bring back the Hemingway and what he was like when he was healthy and mentally strong and stuff. It's great to play, for me, great to play with on creating story on both Hemingway and on Hunter Thompson. I intercept him at age 20 before he has a chance to get messed up with drugs and alcohol. And it's 1958, and he made a promise to their second grade teacher that if those bad people, the Nazis, were still around when he and his buddy Jordan grew up, they would hunt them down, and they do, but they don't do any killing. They don't do any of that any of that stuff like you see in the movies and TV. What they do is they really seriously jack these Nazis around and basically take them down either financially or some other way, but they pursue Nazis endlessly in volumes 1, 2, and 3. And they bring in a lot of extra people, including people like Sherlock Holmes and people like that. So it's great fun. I had a lot of fun in both of these. And then in the Hunter Thompson, by the way, just so you know, Hemingway appears there because it's set in 1958 and he's still alive and well, maybe not well, but he's still alive doing his thing. And there's some very fun stories. All of these books are easy to read, and they're broken down into chapters, and you could almost delve into a chapter. For example, chapter 6 in the second Hemingway book, Return to England. Chapter 6, I think you'd get a kick out of it, Douglas, is about the Beatles and where they haven't become famous yet, but they're on the rise. And we go to hear them at the Cavern, February 1962. and Hemingway, who they think is this guy, the character in the book, who's Matt Fitzgerald. They don't think it's Hemingway, except they say he looks like him. Anyway, the Beatles. If you get a chance to take a look at the chapter 6 in Hemingway's Return to England on the Beatles chapter, it's just funny, 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 and great, and revealing on things that I never knew about. Like in 1962, we knew the polar caps, the snow caps in Kilimanjaro were melting and would disappear in our lifetime. And Hemingway ends up lecturing John Lennon and the Beatles about that. It's just great. I was very fortunate to find these stories and to dig into them.
Well, Michael, unfortunately, we are out of time, so we're going to have to wind this down. So let's give out the titles. The Hemingway is called Hemingway's Return to Ireland.
That's the second one. The first one is Hemingway's Retreat to, well, excuse me, it's Hemingway's Retreat to Ireland. And then the second one is Hemingway's Return to England.
Okay. And then the Hunter Thompson book is called
The Return of Hunter S. Thompson, Volume 1 and 2 and 3. And the subtitle in all of them, An Untold Story of Nazi Hunting.
Okay. Last question. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Yes, it is. I think I put it on there, www.jmichaelmoriarty.com.
Okay. Well, I wish we had more time, but thank you so much for coming on. It was nice meeting you and chatting with you.
Oh, it was just a great opportunity, and I'm so impressed by your body of work. And like I said, seeing that David Baldacci interview recently just sort of blew me away. That was so impressive.
Thank you.
It is really truly an honor to be with you here today.
Well, the honor was mine. And by the way, the name that we were stumped on at the beginning was Allen Ginsberg.
Oh, yes, Ginsberg. Can I tell you one quick one? Is he came to Lincoln, Nebraska when I was a student down there at the university, and he wrote a poem. There's a street called O Street downtown, and Ginsberg wrote a poem called Zero Street.
Oh, perfect.
About downtown Lincoln, which I was hilarious.
Okay, Michael, take care. Best of luck.
You too. Okay, Douglas. Thank you.